Picture this. You're walking across a massive, ancient stone bridge as the freezing fog rolls in. Or, maybe you're stepping inside the imposing walls of a centuries-old castle, one that has miraculously survived countless devastating earthquakes. The air is thick, the stones are freezing cold, and as you trace your hand along that ancient foundation, a really chilling thought crosses your mind. What is actually holding these massive stones together? Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the shadows of architectural history, taking a deliberate journey into one of the darkest, most unsettling legends ever recorded. We're looking at a practice that completely blurs the line between myth, superstition, and, well, terrifying reality. So you might want to make sure the lights are on for this one, because the deeper we dig into these foundations, the darker it gets.
If you were to ask a modern engineer this question, you'd get a pretty predictable answer, right? They're going to tell you all about steel reinforcement, perfect concrete mix ratios, load-bearing calculations, safety factors, the whole shebang. And that makes sense. That is the rational, modern world we live in. But I want you to step back in time with me for a minute. Imagine you are a master builder in ancient Japan. You don't have steel. You definitely don't have modern physics. You basically just have wood, stone, and the absolutely terrifying forces of nature constantly working against you. If you ask those ancient builders what truly held a massive fortress together against all odds, well, their answer would probably make you pause before you ever cross an ancient bridge again.
Yeah, according to ancient builders, it was human life. Just take a second and let that sink in. Not stone, not mortar, human life. The ancient belief was that the absolute ultimate building material was a literal human being placed directly inside the foundation. It's a completely chilling realization that the architectural marvels we casually photograph on our vacations might have actually been built on top of the ultimate human sacrifice.
Okay, let's dive into this. The practice is called Hitobashira, a word that literally translates to human pillar. And this wasn't just some casual fringe superstition. It was a deeply ingrained cultural practice of burying a living person beneath or near large-scale construction projects. Think dams, bridges, and castles. But why? Why do this? Well, the character for pillar in Japanese is also used in Shintoism as a counter for a deity. So by burying a person alive in the structure, they weren't just discarding a life. In their minds, they were actually enshrining that person's soul. The victim essentially became a localized guardian deity. They were structurally and spiritually binding the building together so it could supposedly withstand enemy attacks and brutal natural disasters.
Section 1. Appeasing the angry gods. To truly grasp how anyone could justify such a terrifying act, we've got to look at the world through their eyes.
When you look at history, Japan is essentially nature's ultimate obstacle course. Early builders were incredibly frustrated, and honestly, you can't blame them. Imagine you spend years building a dam, and a typhoon just instantly destroys it. You construct this vital bridge for your village, and a flood washes it away in a single afternoon. When structures keep failing over and over, human psychology tends to take a really dark turn. Rational engineering logic starts losing ground to supernatural explanations. The nobles and the builders, they genuinely believed their walls weren't collapsing because of bad math. No, they believed the spirits were angry. The rivers were ruled by fierce dragon deities, the mountains by ancient spirits, and building on their territory? That required paying a toll. Unfortunately, the only currency these angry gods seemed to accept was the ultimate sacrifice: human blood.
Let's move to Char and see how this builds across history, because this isn't just an isolated incident from some forgotten century. The lore spans an incredibly long time. The very first recorded instance pops up way back in the 300s AD in the Nihon Shoki, involving Emperor Nintoku, who supposedly sacrificed men just to calm some raging river gods. We see it peak much later during the chaotic Sengoku period in the 1500s, with towering structures like Maruahoka Castle. And shockingly, the term and the sheer horror associated with it stretch all the way into the 20th century with the Jomen Tunnel excavation in 1914. This is literally a ghost story that simply refused to die.
Section 2. Tales built in stone. Let's move from the abstract timeline into the specific, terrifying legends themselves. A really fascinating primary source bridges the gap between folklore and actual history here. Back in 1918, a scholar named Noritake Tsuda wrote an article for a journal called The Open Court. It was titled Human Sacrifices in Japan, and he pointed out something wild. There is scarcely anyone in Japan who hasn't heard at least one story of Hitobashira. Tsuda's work is absolutely vital because it connects the dots between those spooky campfire folktales and actual documented cultural history.
He started tracking these legends down, showing just how deeply embedded the trauma of these sacrifices really was in the national consciousness.
Perhaps the most heartbreaking of all these tales is the tragedy of Marawoka Castle, which was built in 1576. So as the story goes, the castle's stone base kept collapsing. No mortar could hold it together. Desperate, the builders called for a human pillar. And a poor, one-eyed widow named Oshizu actually came forward. She had absolutely nothing to her name except an immense love for her son. So she made a desperate bargain. She said she would allow herself to be buried alive under the central pillar, but only if the Lord promised to raise her son as a samurai. She was placed in the cold earth, the massive stones were dropped, and she was crushed to death. And hey, the walls stood firm. But the Lord was transferred to another province and completely forgot his promise. Oshizu's son remained in grinding poverty. Legend says her betrayed, resentful spirit now haunts the grounds, and every single spring, her tears of sorrow cause the castle's moat to violently overflow.
Then we have Matsue Castle. Now this legend is pure nightmare fuel. The builders desperately needed a sacrifice to stabilize the crumbling tower base. During a local Bond Odori dance festival, they spotted this beautiful, talented 16-year-old maiden. She was violently abducted right out of the crowd and entombed alive inside the castle walls. The castle was finished safely, but a terrible curse seemingly followed. The Lord and his son died suddenly. Locals claimed you could hear the muffled sobbing of a teenage girl echoing from the tower stones in the dead of night. It was so terrifying that for generations, public dancing was strictly banned in the streets of Matsue, just so they wouldn't awaken her angry, restless spirit.
Section 3. Debunking the dark myth. Okay, take a deep breath. Those stories are absolutely chilling, but it's time to turn on the lights.
So the crucial point is, there is a massive divide between the legend and the historical truth. While the myths speak of these romanticized, terrifying ritual sacrifices to appease dragons and angry gods, the cold, hard reality is entirely different. Modern research suggests that many of these Hitobashira tales are actually societal coping mechanisms. They are historical cover-ups. They were a way for society to process horrific occupational accidents, brutal working conditions, and forced labor. Think about it. It is much easier for a ruling class to say, hey, the gods demanded a sacred sacrifice, rather than admit, our engineering is deeply flawed and our workers are dying because we refuse to build safely.
We actually start to see this shift in understanding thanks to early 20th century scholars like Orikuchi Shinobu and folklorists like Yanagita Kunio. They began meticulously peeling back the layers of these myths, and they noticed a really glaring pattern. The so-called sacrifices were almost always the most vulnerable people in society. We're talking poor widows, young girls, transient workers. The scholars realized that these legends weren't just spooky ghost stories. They were a sociological mirror. They reflected the brutal class struggles and the immense human cost of building a civilization.
To prove just how wild and out of hand these myths could get, let's look at the Nagara River Bridge. The legend here states that a supposedly wise man named Iwa suggested a human sacrifice to stop the bridge from washing away. He told the builders, hey, just select the first man who crosses the river wearing torn trousers. Unluckily for him, the first man to cross was, yep, Iwa himself. He was promptly buried alive. It sounds like a perfectly tragic fable about poetic justice, right? Well, researchers have completely blown the story apart.
And this brilliantly illustrates how myths are born out of super mundane reality. Look at the definition of the word hakama. Yes, it primarily means traditional Japanese wide-legged trousers. But in ancient civil engineering, hakama was also the technical term for the reinforcing stiffeners used to protect bridge piers from water damage. Iwata wasn't suggesting a human sacrifice at all. He was just an innovative engineer suggesting they use technical hakama stiffeners to reinforce the bridge. But the local population totally misunderstood the technical jargon, assumed he meant the clothing, and over centuries, the story morphed from an engineering breakthrough into a grim tale of human sacrifice. Nobody was buried, it was literally just a linguistic misunderstanding. Crazy, right?
Section 4, the true cost of ambition. Let's move to our final section.
Because while we can debunk stories of ancient, magical sacrifices, the reality of what happened in modern times is actually much, much worse. Let's talk about the Jomon Tunnel in Hokkaido, built in 1914 for the railway. For decades, locals whispered terrifying rumors about this tunnel. They said it was cursed by Hitobashira. Train conductors reported seeing ghosts of women in white kimonos falling from the ceiling of the tunnel in the pitch black. It sounded like just another classic spooky folklore tale. That is, until the year 1968.
In 1968, a massive earthquake damaged the Jomon Tunnel, forcing renovation crews to open up the thick concrete walls. And what did they find? Actual human skeletons, standing upright, sealed entirely inside the concrete. But these weren't ancient sacrifices to river gods. These were modern forced laborers. Many of them were Koreans brought over after Japan's annexation of Korea in 1910, forced to work in deadly, inhumane conditions deep within the mountain. When they died from exhaustion or disease, or are horribly injured on the job, the cruel foremen simply threw their bodies into the concrete pour to save time and money.
This forces us to look at a massive shift in meaning here. Ancient Hitobashira was framed as sacred, spiritual, and sometimes even voluntary. Modern Hitobashira, that is the grim reality of unwilling victims completely crushed by industrial ambition. The horror isn't supernatural at all. The real monsters weren't dragons or mountain spirits. They were corporate negligence, boundless cruelty, and the willingness to treat human lives as disposable building materials. The ghost stories were essentially a societal smokescreen covering up extreme, deadly workplace abuse.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how society eventually confronted this trauma. We moved from the myth of the weeping ghost to actually acknowledging the harsh reality of unrecorded workplace accidents. Folklorists and historians realized that these monuments to Hitobashira, the little shrines you see by bridges and castles, they acted as a form of collective mourning for forgotten laborers. Today, that legacy has evolved. If you go to a construction site in Japan today, you're not going to see shrines for human pillars, you'll see the green cross. The green cross is the universal symbol for workplace safety in Japan, and many scholars believe its spiritual roots trace directly back to the desperate desire to protect workers from ever becoming human pillars again. It's a genuinely beautiful memorial born out of a profoundly dark past.
Consider this profound reality. Every great structure has a human cost, whether measured in sacrifice, labor, or simply the accumulated effort of countless forgotten workers. Whether we're talking about the mythical poor widow crushed beneath Maruoka Castle, or the tragic, very real forced laborers permanently buried inside the Jomon tunnel walls, progress always carries a heavy toll. Buildings are not just engineering achievements. They are monuments to human endurance, intense ambition, and sometimes profound hidden tragedy.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. We've stripped away the ghost stories to find the historical truth, and honestly, the truth is a whole lot heavier. So I want to leave you with this question. Next time you visit a magnificent castle, cross an ancient stone bridge, or ride a train through a dark mountain tunnel, will you just see the architecture, or will you take a moment to think of the human cost resting silently beneath the stones? Thank you so much for exploring the shadows of history with me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking beneath the surface, and I'll see you in the next explainer.